Hey guys, tonight we slip into the frozen silence of the Middle Ages, back when Europe's forests were thicker, darker, and a little too full of wolves. Imagine you're standing at the mouth of a cave in some lonely valley. The air is sharp enough to sting your nose, and the wind sighs like it's warning you to turn back. But you don't. You step inside, one foot crunching on old frost, the other landing in a puddle of centuries-old damp. Congratulations, you've just entered a medieval hermit's home. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing who's out there in the world at this hour. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the smell. Cold stone has a scent, something metallic and old, like wet coins and forgotten incense. The cave walls are slick, glittering faintly in the weak glow of a single beeswax candle. That little flame is your only defence against the dark, and even it looks unsure about sticking around. You can hear water dripping somewhere deeper in, slow and steady, like the cave's heartbeat. This is where some men chose to live. Completely alone, often for decades. In the medieval world, hermits were the ultimate quitters of society, walking away from everything. Family, food markets, gossip, taxes, even the smell of baked bread. They weren't monks exactly. Monks had monasteries, communities, routines, and occasionally decent wine. Hermits wanted the opposite. A one-person apocalypse, a life boiled down to breath, prayer, and whatever scraps nature allowed. Historians still argue whether most hermits were deeply holy or just spectacularly tired of people. The truth probably sits somewhere between sainthood and burnout. A few sought divine enlightenment through solitude. Others just wanted to escape landlords and endless feudal drama. And maybe, just maybe, you understand that urge a little, especially when your group chat won't stop pinging at 2 a.m. As your eyes adjust, you start to see the cave's rough furnishings, a flat slab of rock that serves as both bed and table, a bundle of straw that's definitely seen better centuries, a tiny wooden cross wedged into a crack in the wall. Everything else is stone, shadow and echo. You crouch near a little alcove where the hermit might have stored food, a few dried roots, maybe a hunk of stale bread or something unidentifiable that smells suspiciously like regret. You can almost picture him sitting here, wrapped in patch cloak, fingers stiff with cold, whispering prayers into the still air. The medieval mind believed silence had power, that by cutting away noise you could hear God more clearly. Of course, you might also start hearing things that weren't exactly divine. Scholars debate whether some hermits experienced genuine mystical visions, or just good old-fashioned vitamin deficiency hallucinations. Hard to say when your diet includes more moss than meat. Outside, the world keeps moving. Peasants ploughing frozen soil, church bells tolling miles away, kings making terrible decisions. Inside, time stretches like wax near the candle flame. Slow, fragile, and a little sad. You feel a mix of awe and claustrophobia. The cave isn't just a shelter, it's a test. One that few people today could pass. There's no door to slam, no phone to scroll, no blanket you can microwave for warmth. Just the sound of your own breathing bouncing off rock. There's something hypnotic about it, though. The rhythm of dripping water, the flicker of the candle, the faint rustle of a mouse searching for crumbs. In a world where life was mostly noise, markets, sermons, blacksmiths hammering, you can almost see the appeal of a cave where the loudest sound is your heartbeat. You reach out and touch the wall. It's rough, ancient, and icy. The hermit who once lived here probably used that same wall to mark the passing of days. Scratches or charcoal lines counting time in solitude. Maybe he stopped counting after a while. When every sunrise looks the same, numbers lose their edge. There's a half-frozen jug near the wall. Inside, the remnants of mead or water, or maybe both if he wasn't picky. Archaeologists have found such remnants in actual hermit sites, evidence that even the most ascetic souls occasionally needed a drink strong enough to forget how lonely they were. One scholar once joked that medieval asceticism was equal parts holiness and stubbornness. Hard to argue with that when you're shivering in a cave lit by a dying candle. A gust of wind slips through a crack, sending the flame dancing. For a moment the shadows twist into strange shapes. Figures kneeling, arms outstretched, faces half-formed by flickering light. Your imagination fills the void with company, but they vanish as fast as they appeared. That's how isolation works. The mind starts making its own guests. You sit, listening to the drip, drip and drip, and wonder how anyone could endure this for years. But maybe that's the secret. The cave wasn't meant to be endured. It was meant to strip everything away until nothing was left but the soul, naked and cold, waiting for an answer that might never come. And still, despite the ache in your bones and the whispering dark, there's something peaceful here. The kind of peace that comes not from comfort, but from surrender. You exhale, watch the mist of your breath dissolve into the air, and for just a second you understand why someone might choose this life. Somewhere in the distance a church bell tolls, one of those slow, echoing notes that rolls through valleys like smoke. It reminds you that the world still exists beyond this cave, messy and loud and warm. But for now, you stay here, wrapped in shadows and candlelight, taking the first slow step into a story of solitude, faith and frost. You wake, or rather stir, from the cold, cramped dream that passes for sleep in this cave. The candle has guttered out. Your breath fogs the air in ghostly puffs. You pull your wool cloak tighter and listen to the silence, wondering, not for the first time, why anyone in their right mind would do this. Why walk away from the world just to freeze in a hole in the ground? The answer you soon realise lies somewhere between madness and holiness. In the medieval imagination, solitude wasn't punishment, it was purification. The church taught that the world was full of temptation, taverns, gossip, lust, ambition, you name it, and that by fleeing it all, you could get closer to God. The hermit wasn't rejecting life, he was trying to refine it down to something pure and bright, like a spark hidden inside a pile of ash. Still, you can't help but suspect that some of these hermits were just really bad at small talk. Historians still argue whether most of them were genuinely spiritual pioneers or just folks who'd had one too many awkward church potlucks. There are records of ex-soldiers, failed monks, even runaway debtors reinventing themselves as holy recluses. Some were ordained priests seeking silence, others were barely literate peasants following a rumour of divine inspiration. The line between calling and escapism? Pretty blurry. You picture the moment our hermit decided to disappear. Maybe it was during a sermon, when the priest's words about sin felt too heavy to bear. Or maybe it happened in the marketplace, the noise of coins and gossip rising like smoke until he couldn't breathe. So one day, he simply walked. No goodbye letters, no fanfare, just a quiet exit through the back gate. Travelling as a would-be hermit wasn't romantic. Roads were muddy, bandits were real, and medieval Europe smelled like a mix of dung and despair. Yet somehow word spread about anchorites and eremites, those brave souls who left society to pray for everyone else. Some people called them mad, others whispered that they were saints in training, and occasionally the church approved of them, so long as they didn't start preaching weird personal gospels about glowing sheep or talking stones. You can almost imagine him trudging through frostbitten hills, looking for the right spot. Not just any cave would do. The perfect one had to be remote but reachable, bleak but not deadly. If it had a trickle of fresh water and a patch of sunlight for warmth, all the better. Choosing a cave was like choosing a destiny. You couldn't just pick one with a nice view. In England, some hermits built huts near bridges or crossroads so they could pray for travellers' souls. In France, they vanished into forests thick with fog. In Egypt, long before that, the Desert Fathers had already set the gold standard for holy isolation. Men who vanished into the sand to duel temptation and emerged spiritually buffed. Europe's cave dwellers were their frostbitten cousins. You think of one particular hermit named Godric of Finchala, once a merchant, later a saint, who supposedly lived barefoot in the English north, surviving on herbs and the occasional eel. That's right, eels. His pet eels reportedly obeyed him like friendly serpents, which feels both adorable and mildly horrifying. Historians still argue whether that detail was metaphor or just someone getting creative with hagiography. Maybe your hermit has no eels, but he's got the same fire. You can feel it in the way he breathes, slowly, deliberately, as if each exhale is a prayer. He's not here to die, though that's always a possibility. He's here to strip away everything unnecessary. Every worldly comfort is a distraction, every human voice an echo pulling him away from divine focus. There's a strange logic to it. You start to sense how the medieval mind measured holiness not in comfort, but in endurance. Pain was proof. Cold was clarity. Hunger was honesty. The fewer blankets you had, the closer you were to the saints. It sounds dramatic now, but back then it made perfect sense. When plague, famine and death were your daily neighbours, renouncing comfort wasn't weird, it was expected. Still, the human brain craves company. And so, you notice little traces of compromise in this solitude. A carved wooden icon of Mary tucked into a niche. A worn rosary fashioned from knotted string. Maybe even a tiny mirror, not for vanity, but to check whether frostbite was winning. Every object in this space has a reason, a memory, a flicker of comfort disguised as necessity. You can almost hear him muttering prayers under his breath. Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. Over and over, until the words lose their edges and melt into the cave's slow heartbeat. The repetition is hypnotic, like a medieval version of white noise. You find yourself matching his rhythm without meaning to, your thoughts stretching, slowing, becoming something quieter. And then, in that stillness comes the creeping thought, maybe you couldn't handle this. Not the hunger, not the isolation, not the endless self-confrontation. But the hermit isn't afraid of silence. Silence is his forge. It burns away what's false, leaving only the raw shape of faith. You wonder what your own faith, whatever that means to you, would look like if you stripped it bare like this. A rat scurries past and you flinch, half expecting him to jump up and bless it. Because believe it or not, that happened. There are records of hermits befriending wild animals, foxes, birds, even bears, claiming they were sent by God for company. Historians still argue whether those stories are allegories or evidence that extreme loneliness makes you chatty with wildlife. Either way, it's oddly comforting. You feel a cold draft from the cave mouth and catch a glimpse of dawn, a smear of pale light over the horizon. Another day begins, indistinguishable from the last, yet full of invisible meaning. You can almost hear him whisper, "Thank you," to no one in particular. You breathe it in, the scent of smoke, damp stone, and faint candle wax. For a moment you understand the strange beauty of surrendering to solitude. Then your stomach growls, and you remember that beauty doesn't taste like much when you haven't eaten since yesterday's root stew. Still, you stay, because something in this man's madness feels oddly human, an echo of every time you've wanted to turn down the noise, step back from the world, and just be. You wake to a sound that's almost comforting, the slow gurgle of water dripping into a stone bowl. It's morning, or at least the grey light leaking through the cave mouth suggests so. The air still tastes like iron and ash. Your hands are stiff, your cloak heavy with dew. You blink the sleep from your eyes and realise something crucial. You need a better cave. The hermit's cave you're in now might be symbolic, but let's be honest. It's also freezing, drafty, and strategically positioned to collect every possible drop of condensation. Not ideal. And that, right there, is your next step in this journey. Finding the right cave. Because, believe it or not, medieval hermits didn't just stumble into random holes in the mountain and call it a day. Choosing a cave was practically a sacred science. You start to imagine the process. Picture yourself trudging across frostbitten hills, a bundle of rough cloth slung over your shoulder, your sandals already regretting their existence. You stop by stream beds, peer into cliffs, and study overhangs the way a realtor studies property lines. You're looking for the perfect combination of isolation, shelter, and survivability. Something far from the village, but not so far that starvation becomes your next-door neighbour. Historians still argue whether hermits were officially assigned caves by bishops, or just went rogue and picked whatever hole they liked best. Some church authorities tried to supervise, because let's face it, holy men in caves could quickly become weird guys starting cults. Others, though, turned a blind eye. If a man wanted to vanish and pray, who were they to stop him? In some regions, like northern France or the British Isles, caves were chosen not just for solitude, but for symbolism. The cave represented the tomb, a place of death and rebirth. By entering it, the hermit was reenacting Christ's withdrawal from the world. Every drip of water, every echo of prayer was part of that transformation. You can almost feel the weight of that symbolism as you step deeper into your imaginary cave. It's not exactly glamorous. The floor is uneven, littered with pebbles. The ceiling drips in a way that promises mould will be your constant roommate. You check for airflow. Too little and you'll suffocate on candle smoke. Too much and you'll freeze solid before you reach enlightenment. You find a tiny fissure where air trickles in, bringing with it the faint smell of pine from the woods outside. That's a good sign. You test the walls, strong enough to hold but porous enough to stay breathable. You note a shallow ledge near the entrance, perfect for placing a lamp or a bowl of water. A hermit's cave wasn't decorated, but it was carefully arranged. Every inch served a purpose. The sleeping corner, the prayer niche, the supply hollow, and maybe a small opening to watch the sky without being watched yourself. In the distance, a stream murmurs softly. You follow it down the slope, your breath forming small clouds. That stream might be your lifeline. Water for drinking, washing, maybe even baptizing the occasional brave pilgrim who makes it this far. You kneel to taste it. It's icy, sharp, and cleaner than anything you've known. For a moment you think maybe you could live here. Then a gust of wind howls through the valley, reminding you that optimism freezes quickly. You clutch your cloak tighter and mutter something that could be either a prayer or a complaint. Hard to tell which. Back in the cave you start planning your minimal furnishings. A straw mat, a few clay pots, a crucifix carved from driftwood. Maybe, if you're lucky, a small bell to mark prayer hours. That's about as luxurious as it gets. Archaeologists have found remnants of such setups in real hermit sites. Tiny hearths for fire, smoothed out stones that once served as stools, even traces of soot marking where walls were blackened by years of candle smoke. The human presence is faint but undeniable, a ghostly fingerprint of survival. You wonder how many nameless souls carved out these little kingdoms of stillness. A quirky tidbit: not all hermits were truly alone. Some had what were called anchoresses, women who lived walled into tiny cells attached to churches, receiving food through a slot in the wall. Talk about commitment. There's one famous example, Julian of Norwich, whose cell was built right beside the church so she could hear Mass but never be seen. She claimed her visions of divine love came through her window slit, along with the occasional loaf of bread. Historians still debate whether her isolation was purely voluntary or a spiritual contract of sorts. Either way, she probably had fewer drafts than your cave does. As you arrange your modest new home, a kind of rhythm begins to form. Gather wood, patch leaks with moss, clear the entrance of snow. You start to think in smaller circles, the world shrinking down to what your hands can touch. There's a peace in that, a simplicity modern life rarely allows. But there's also danger. The moment you stop moving, the cold creeps back, whispering reminders that holiness doesn't keep you warm. You light a new candle. The flame flickers against the rock, throwing long shadows that look like ribs and wings. The air smells faintly of tallow and damp wool. You hum under your breath, a tune you can't name just to fill the silence. The cave hums back in its slow, echoing way. Maybe that's why hermits called these places cells, because they were both prisons and wombs, places where something might die and something else might be born. Later that night, as the wind moans outside, you catch yourself imagining the villagers in the valley below. They sit by fires, eating stew, telling stories about the madman in the hills who talks to God. Maybe they leave offerings at the edge of the woods, bread, berries, a candle. They're afraid of you, but also drawn to you. Humans always are to those who disappear. And so, the cave becomes more than shelter, it becomes a symbol. To them, you're halfway between man and myth. To yourself, you're just trying to make it through another night without your water jug freezing solid. You lie down on your straw mat, pull your cloak over your shoulders, and let your mind wander. What will tomorrow bring? Hunger? Revelation? Frostbite? You can't tell. But for now, the cave feels a little less empty, a little more like purpose. The cave has settled into a rhythm of sound, the slow crackle of your small fire, the gentle hiss of melting snow in a pot, and the occasional scratch of your own heartbeat echoing inside your ears. You've been here long enough now to realise that solitude doesn't mean stillness. There's a constant dialogue between your body, the cave, and the world beyond. You just have to learn the language. Today you take stock of your worldly possessions, or what little of them remain. The medieval hermit's toolkit could fit in a modern grocery bag. A wooden bowl, a small knife, maybe a crucifix or a worn parchment of psalms, ink fading from candle soot and cold fingers, a threadbare blanket made of coarse wool. If he was lucky, a small rosary, nothing shiny, just knotted twine rubbed smooth by endless prayer. That's it. That's the arsenal for a life of isolation. You can't help but smile at the thought. Minimalism before minimalism was cool. Somewhere out there, a monk would be carefully illuminating a manuscript about divine simplicity, while your hermit is living it in the rawest form possible. Still, simplicity doesn't mean ease. Every tool, every scrap of fabric here carries a story of barter, craft, or miracle. The knife? Forged by a blacksmith who thought you were insane but took pity. The bowl? Hollowed from driftwood by hand. The blanket? Gifted by a pilgrim who swore she saw angels at your cave's entrance. Historians still argue whether hermits actually accepted such gifts or refused them out of pride. Some texts describe saints who would rather freeze than take a blanket, insisting divine fire was enough. Spoiler, divine fire was not enough. You rummage through your meagre supplies and pull out one of your most important tools. A crude staff is not for walking today, but for stirring your small fire and maybe keeping wild animals at bay. You can almost feel its rough bark against your palm, its surface polished by both time and necessity. It's funny how something so simple becomes sacred when it's your lifeline. As you work, your thoughts drift to how hermits view tools not as conveniences, but as spiritual companions. Every act, lighting a candle, fetching water, mending cloth, was an act of prayer. The rhythm of work replaced the rhythm of speech. You repeat the same actions day after day until your hands know the motions better than your mind. A quirky historical note slips into your thoughts. Some hermits actually had writing tools too. A few were surprisingly literate, copying scripture by hand in near darkness. Imagine bending over parchment by flickering light, quill scratching, ink freezing mid-stroke. One wrong breath, and the page blots forever. And yet they wrote anyway. Letters to monks, psalms of gratitude, reflections on divine silence. Somewhere out there, a handful of those writings survive, faint traces of lives otherwise swallowed by time. You pick up a small iron tool, a fire striker, and remember the hours it took to figure it out. Flint, spark, kindling, breath. Fire is both a gift and a danger here. Too little, and you shiver. Too much, and your cave becomes a tomb of smoke. The trick is patience. You kneel close, coaxing a faint orange glow into life, murmuring a few choice medieval curses that sound suspiciously like prayers. When the flame finally catches, you grin in triumph. A win's a win. Outside, snow begins to fall again, fat and slow, softening the world into silence. The cave mouth frames it like a living painting, flakes drifting through grey air, landing on moss and stone. You hold your hands to the fire, savouring the fragile warmth. The moment feels holy in its simplicity. And yet there's humour here too. Imagine a saintly biographer describing this scene centuries later. And lo, the blessed hermit, by divine perseverance, did kindle his humble flame, resisting the cold temptations of sloth. You snort. In reality, you're just trying not to freeze your extremities off. The air thickens with the smell of tallow and damp straw. You notice that your candle stash is running low. Beeswax was a luxury, often traded from local monasteries, and cheaper tallow candles smoked so badly they turned cave walls black. You make a mental note. Ration them carefully. Night without light isn't poetic. It's terrifying. Later, you take your bowl and walk to the small stream outside. The snow crunches underfoot, each step careful and deliberate. You kneel, scoop water, and watch tiny ice crystals float like silver dust. You drink slowly, the cold stinging your throat but clearing your mind. You think of how water must have felt to those early hermits. Both necessity and symbol, purity, life, baptism. In its flow, they saw divine constancy. On your way back, you notice faint tracks near the cave. A fox, maybe, or a pilgrim. You pause, squinting. There's always the risk of company, even when you've sworn off the world. Some hermits welcomed visitors, others hid until they left. Historians still debate how alone these people truly were. Solitude, it turns out, has gradients. Inside again, you settle down and study your tiny arsenal of tools by the firelight. You realise something strange. They've stopped feeling like objects. The staff, the bowl, the knife, they're extensions of you now. In a life stripped of clutter, even the humblest things shine with quiet dignity. You start to see why some hermits described their tools as brothers. Brother fire, sister water, brother bread knife. Okay, maybe not the last one, but you get the idea. As night falls, the cave exhales its usual chill. You tuck your tools near your sleeping mat, half out of habit, half out of superstition. Each item is a boundary against chaos, a small defiance in the face of nature's indifference. You whisper a brief prayer, half gratitude, half exhaustion, and stretch out on your mat. The last thing you see before sleep is the faint orange glow of your fire, reflected in the bowl of water beside it. Two small lights flickering like eyes in the dark. You smile, realizing that in this place, survival itself feels like prayer. And just before the dream takes you, a mischievous thought flits through your mind. Somewhere out there, a medieval monk is sleeping on a feather mattress, and you hope his candle goes out. You wake to the sound of your own shivering. The fire has gone out again. The air is so cold that when you exhale, your breath curls upward like incense. You sit up, bones cracking, and realise something fundamental about the hermit's life. Every single morning begins as a negotiation with discomfort. Today is no exception. It's time to turn this frozen cave into something resembling home. You look around, mentally mapping your surroundings. A patch of straw marks your sleeping space. The little hearth needs rebuilding. There's a crack in the wall where the wind howls like an angry ghost. You have no bricks, no carpentry tools, and no insulation beyond what nature grudgingly provides. But medieval hermits were nothing if not resourceful. You pick up your staff, roll up your sleeves, and get to work. Step 1, patch the walls. You gather moss from the rocks outside, soft, spongy, slightly damp. You mash it into the cracks, layering it with clay and pebbles. It's crude, but it works. You can almost hear the medieval hermit's inner monologue. Take that, wind. It's hard not to feel proud of something so small. Historians still argue whether hermits received help building their shelters or did it all themselves. Some were sponsored by local monasteries or noble patrons who admired their holy suffering. Others truly went off-grid, living in caves, hollowed trees, or even abandoned wells. There's a record of one man in 12th century Germany who built his own stone hut by hand and roofed it with turf. It collapsed 3 times before it finally held. Persistence apparently counted as piety. You start to collect twigs and bits of fallen wood. They're damp, reluctant to burn, but you coax them into life anyway. The small flame flickers against the walls, filling the cave with an amber glow that feels warmer than it is. You crouch near it, rubbing your hands, thinking how much this ritual, fire building, wall mending, water fetching, defines your new existence. Then comes the bedding. You strip old moss from the floor, replace it with straw, and line it with a few rabbit skins you found on earlier walks. The skins smell faintly of smoke and wilderness, but they'll do. The bed isn't comfortable, but it's survivable. You whisper, half to yourself, St. Anthony didn't have memory foam either. That earns you a quiet chuckle. Jokes are currency when your only audience is a damp wall. Next, you think about food. Building a life from nothing means mastering the medieval art of creative starvation. Your diet revolves around what the land gives, and the land, at this moment, is mostly frozen. You check your supplies, a few dried roots, some barley flour, a pouch of salt. Not exactly inspiring, but edible. You mix water with the barley in your bowl and stir it into a paste over the fire. It thickens into something that might generously be called porridge. You eat slowly, savouring the faint nutty taste and pretending it's stew. Quirky historical fact: some hermits spiced their bland meals with crushed herbs or wild garlic. Others went to extremes. St. Simeon the Stylite allegedly ate nothing but lentils soaked in cold water. Historians still argue whether that was ascetic devotion or a very bad diet plan. As the morning stretches into afternoon, you start to decorate. Not with luxury, but with meaning. You carve a tiny cross into the wall near your bed. The motion steadies your hands, the rhythmic scrape of stone on stone echoing softly. The cross isn't art, it's a reminder. Every hermit's home, no matter how bleak, had some symbol anchoring them to faith. You pause to look outside. The landscape is vast, silent, and indifferent. The forest below looks like a sea of black spires. The wind carries a distant church bell, so faint it might be your imagination. You realise the paradox of the hermit's world. You've renounced humanity, yet every sound from afar still feels like a thread connecting you to it. You go back inside and rearrange your few possessions. The staff leans near the entrance. The knife rests beside the bowl. The candle stubs are lined up neatly, little soldiers of light waiting for duty. There's something soothing about the order of it. In a chaotic world, structure becomes salvation. As night creeps in, the temperature drops fast. You huddle near your fire, wrapped in your cloak, and listen to the cave breathe. Every gust of wind feels like the earth sighing. You can almost sense the presence of all those who came before. Men who prayed here, froze here, maybe even died here. The stone remembers. You find yourself wondering what kept them going. Was it faith, fear, stubbornness? Maybe all three. The church certainly saw them as spiritual heroes, but the truth feels messier. Some hermits broke under isolation, wandering back to villages babbling about angels or demons. Others thrived, radiating peace that drew pilgrims from miles away. Historians still argue which were more authentic. But the line between saint and madman is thin and colder than you expected. A mouse scampers across the floor, nibbling at a crumb of barley paste. You watch it without anger. In this place, everything alive feels like kin. Eat, little brother, you murmur, amused at how naturally that nickname comes. Medieval hermits often called animals brother or sister, seeing creation as a reflection of divine harmony. You wonder if that piety or just prolonged loneliness wearing a halo? The mouse vanishes, The fire sighs and the world grows quiet again. You stare at the ceiling, tracing the uneven patterns of soot and stone. You've made this cave into something livable, even if livable is a generous term. It's not comfort you've built, it's stability, the kind that keeps madness at arm's length. And as you finally stretch out on your straw bed, cloak tucked tight, you catch yourself whispering a line you've heard monks say, laborare est orare, to work is to pray. You smile. In this place it's not just a motto, it's survival. The last thing you feel before sleep is the slow pulse of the earth beneath you, the faint rhythm of life continuing indifferent yet eternal. For the first time, you don't resent the cold, you respect it. It's your teacher now. The morning begins with mist, thick, ghostly, curling through the mouth of the cave like it's searching for you. The air feels heavy, quiet and ancient. You sit up slowly, rubbing your arms, listening to the soft hiss of dew dripping from the ceiling. The cave breathes with you. Another day has begun, and in this strange, pared-down world, even the act of waking up feels like a small ceremony. The life of a medieval hermit runs on rhythm, not time. You don't have a clock, only light and instinct. The faintest silver at the cave mouth means dawn prayers. The coldest hour before sunrise means reflection. Or, more realistically, trying to convince yourself to leave the warmth of your straw mat. You mutter something halfway between a blessing and a groan and rise to begin your daily pattern. First comes the prayer. You kneel on the cold ground, tracing the sign of the cross with fingers that barely bend in the chill. Lord, grant me strength, you whisper, the words forming tiny clouds in the air. There's no audience, no choir, just you and the dripping cave, and yet somehow it feels vast. Medieval hermits believed that praying in solitude amplified their devotion, that a single whispered psalm in a cave could echo louder in heaven than 100 voices in a cathedral. You can't prove it, but as you murmur your prayers, the echo really does sound like it's listening. Historians still argue about the structure of hermit routines. Some lived like monks, dividing the day into canonical hours, matins, lauds, vespers, compline. Others, especially the more feral types, prayed whenever guilt or hunger reminded them to. You, being new to all this, aim for a mix of discipline and survival. Pray at dawn, gather at noon, endure at dusk. Repeat. After prayer, it's time for the essentials. The fire's out again. You crouch, relighting it with practiced care, whispering a few choice remarks to the stubborn flint. Once the small flame catches, you set your pot above it and melt snow for water. The steam curls upward, fragrant with smoke and faint minerals. It's not coffee, but you pretend. Then comes food. Your breakfast is what generous people might call rustic. A handful of boiled roots and yesterday's leftover barley mush. You chew slowly, eyes half closed, letting the blandness blur into meditation. Medieval records suggest that some hermits fasted for days, claiming divine strength replaced physical hunger. You try to imagine that, but right now, divine strength sounds suspiciously like wishful thinking. When you've eaten, you clean your bowl, sweep your cave floor with a bundle of twigs, and step outside. The world hits you like a cold baptism. The valley below glistens with frost, and mist curls through the trees like unspooling wool. You breathe deep, lungs aching, heart steadying. Every day out here feels earned. You wander a short distance to check your traps, simple noose snares meant to catch rabbits, or, if luck strikes, a pheasant. Most days they're empty. Today, though, you find a single bird, small, grey and very deceased. You whisper a quick apology to it and carry it back to the cave. That'll be dinner. As you clean the bird, your mind drifts. Hermits weren't hunters by nature. Most saw killing as sinful, but necessity has a way of bending theology. You remember reading that St. Cuthbert, who lived on a cold North Sea island, sometimes caught fish to survive, though he wept every time. Compassion and hunger, you murmur, two sides of the same prayer. You set the bird aside for later and gather herbs from the rocky slope. Wild thyme, maybe a sprig of sorrel if you're lucky. You crush them between your palms, releasing their scent, and smile. Even here, amid stone and silence, life insists on growing. That's something the hermits understood better than anyone. By midday, the sun has burned through the mist, spilling pale gold light into the cave. You take that as your cue to rest. Sitting on your straw mat, you listen to the mountain. Woodpeckers in the distance, wind combing the trees, a faint rumble that might be thunder or just your stomach protesting. In this quiet, you start to notice the strange intimacy of routine. Every sound, every motion becomes familiar, almost companionable. And then there's the boredom. Oh yes, the glorious medieval boredom. No entertainment, no conversation, not even a good scandal to gossip about. Just the same prayers, the same chores, the same stone walls. You realise why some hermits reported seeing visions. It wasn't always divine revelation. Sometimes it was just the brain rebelling against monotony. Historians still argue which visions were genuine and which were psychological side effects of prolonged deprivation. You suspect it's a 50-50 split. You decide to take a walk, partly for exercise, partly to remind yourself there's still a world out there. You climb a narrow path that winds above the cave. The snow crunches softly underfoot, the wind hums through pine branches, and the view opens, an endless sprawl of valleys, forests, and a silver thread of river far below. For a moment, it's overwhelming. All this beauty and no one to share it with. You whisper, half smiling, maybe that's the point. By evening, you return to your cave, your footprints already fading behind you. You pluck the bird clean, roast it slowly over your fire, and let the smell fill the space. It's a modest feast by modern standards, but it feels extravagant here. The fat sizzles, the herbs crackle, and for once your stomach doesn't complain. You murmur grace, not out of habit, but out of genuine gratitude. After dinner, you settle into the night. The fire's glow flickers across the walls, painting shadows that move like slow ghosts. You trace them with your eyes, finding faces that aren't really there. You're starting to understand why the medieval imagination brimmed with angels and demons. When you stare into flame long enough, it's easy to believe the unseen is watching back. You whisper your final prayers for the day, thanks for survival, forgiveness for impatience, hope for another dawn. Your voice sounds small but steady. The candle sputters low and the world shrinks back to silence. And as sleep creeps over you, you realise that this life, this cycle of prayer, hunger and repetition, isn't about comfort, it's about calibration. Stripping yourself down until every breath feels like communion, every day a kind of fragile miracle. Before your eyes close, a final thought crosses your mind. If this is solitude, it's not emptiness, it's a dialogue written in silence. The morning light oozes into the cave like diluted honey, slow, reluctant and pale. You wake with the kind of stiffness that only stone beds can produce. Every joint complains. You groan, stretch and take a deep breath of cold, smoky air. Today your stomach is the first thing to speak. The hermit's life, you realise, is a never-ending negotiation between the soul's hunger for heaven and the body's hunger for breakfast. Food. It's a word that feels heavier out here than it ever did back in the villages. You reach for your small stash, a pouch of barley, a few shriveled roots, and a chunk of what might once have been bread if bread could fossilise. You sigh. Even the mice seem to have rejected it. You pour a handful of barley into your bowl and mix it with snowmelt, stirring it into a paste over your flickering fire. It smells faintly of wet hay and humility. The medieval hermit's diet wasn't designed for pleasure. It was designed for discipline. The church praised fasting as a way to burn sin through hunger. The less you ate, the more saintly you were, at least in theory. Some hermits took this to extremes. There's a story about St. Nicholas of Tolentino surviving for years on nothing but bread and water, while St. Catherine of Siena supposedly subsisted on the Eucharist alone. Historians still argue whether such feats were miracles or malnutrition with a good press agent. You spoon a mouthful of barley gruel and grimace. It tastes like boiled parchment. You can't help a small laugh. It's the kind of laugh that happens right before despair, but at least it's something. Bon appétit, you mutter and chew. When food ran low, medieval hermits turned to the land. You gather your worn satchel and step outside, crunching through snow-crusted paths to where a few stubborn green shoots poke through. Wild sorrel, bittercress, maybe a few edible mushrooms if you're lucky. You remember how the chronicles described hermits as living off the bounty of the Lord. Looking around at the frozen landscape, you suspect the Lord's bounty might need better distribution. Still, you forage. You dig through cold soil with numb fingers, your breath steaming in the air. You collect a handful of roots and a sprig of thyme. Every discovery feels like treasure. Back in the cave, you lay them out neatly, like relics. The herbs smell sharp and clean, a reminder that even in hardship, the earth gives. As the fire crackles, you slice the roots thin and drop them into your pot. They sizzle faintly, releasing a sweet, woody scent. For a moment, the cave smells almost inviting. You imagine visitors arriving, drawn by the fragrance, expecting stew and conversation. Instead, they'd find one half-frozen hermit and a pot of root soup à la desperation. You chuckle. Michelin would give it 0 stars, you murmur. The act of cooking becomes a meditation. Stirring, tasting, waiting, all prayers in motion. Hermits believed that every mundane task could be sacred if done with focus. You find that comforting. It gives purpose to monotony. You sip your soup slowly, eyes half closed, letting the warmth spread through your body. For a few blissful moments it's enough. After the meal, you clean your bowl carefully. Nothing is wasted here. The rinse water becomes tomorrow's drink. The herb stems become tomorrow's kindling. Even the ashes from your fire will later mix with clay to patch your walls. The hermit's mantra, nothing is wasted if it serves the soul. You remember reading that some hermits grew small gardens when the soil allowed. Tiny patches of beans, leeks or medicinal herbs. Others kept bees both for wax and honey, claiming that bees were the monks of the insect world. You like that idea. It's poetic and slightly absurd, your favourite combination. Historians still debate whether these gardens symbolise self-sufficiency or secret indulgence. After all, a man growing leeks might be a saint, but a man growing onions risks smelling too worldly. In the afternoon you wander again, partly to collect wood, partly to distract your mind from cravings. The wind carries the scent of pine resin, and for a fleeting moment it smells like roasted nuts. You close your eyes and imagine feasts, the buttery pastries of Paris, the roasted meats of noble tables, the sharp wine of monasteries. The fantasy tastes almost real. You open your eyes, see your empty hands, and laugh softly. The mind is cruelly creative when the stomach is empty. You return to the cave and find a small gift from nature, a cluster of berries bright red against the snow. You hesitate. Red berries can be a blessing or a death sentence. You recall the stories, hermits poisoned by mushrooms, monks hallucinating after bad berries, all chalked up later to divine visions. Historians still argue which visions came from heaven and which came from botany gone wrong. You sniff one, decide not to risk it, and instead hang the branch near the entrance as decoration. Even a hermit deserves a little colour. As dust settles, the hunger returns, sharper this time. You try to distract yourself with prayer, but the stomach growls through every amen. Finally you give in and drink water, cool, clean, deceptive. It fills the space for now. You think about how food once defined life. Bread at markets, laughter at tables, gossip over ale. Out here, food is stripped of all that. It's survival, nothing more. But maybe that's the lesson. In scarcity, every taste becomes meaningful. Every bite is gratitude distilled. You lie down, body humming with fatigue. Stomach still hollow, but spirit strangely full. The candle's light flickers against the stone, casting shadows that look like grain fields swaying in invisible wind. You let yourself believe, just for a heartbeat, that somewhere beyond this mountain the harvest is plenty, and someone, somewhere, is eating enough for both of you. Before your eyes close, a final thought drifts through your mind. Half prayer, half joke. Lord, if asceticism builds virtue, I must be a cathedral by now. The cave doesn't laugh, but the fire seems to crackle in agreement. You wake before dawn to a sound that doesn't belong, the crunch of footsteps on frost outside your cave. For a second your heart kicks hard against your ribs. Out here you've grown used to silence, to knowing every sound, the wind through the trees, the trickle of water, the creak of rock. This sound is different. Human. You hold your breath. The footsteps stop near the entrance, a faint cough. Then a voice, soft, uncertain. Holy man! You exhale. Not a bandit then, probably another pilgrim. They've started coming more often lately, drawn by rumours. It's strange, really, how solitude attracts attention. You shuffle to the cave mouth, cloak wrapped tight, face half hidden in shadow. The figure before you is a young woman, bundled in wool, holding a small basket. Steam curls from her breath. I brought bread, she says, bowing her head. For your prayers. You hesitate, torn between gratitude and guilt. You didn't ask for followers. You came here to vanish, not to inspire devotion. But refusing would wound her faith. And you remember that humility isn't only about saying no, it's about knowing when to say yes. You accept the basket, your fingers brushing hers for a fleeting moment. They're warmer than yours. God bless you, you murmur. She smiles shyly, then backs away, vanishing into the mist as quietly as she came. You carry the basket inside. It's simple. A small loaf of rye bread, a wedge of cheese and a sprig of rosemary. The smell alone nearly makes you dizzy. You laugh softly, shaking your head. So much for starving towards sainthood. Historians still argue how much contact hermits actually had with the outside world. Some became local legends, visited by nobles and peasants alike seeking blessings. Others truly lived unseen, their existence more rumour than fact. But for many, the line blurred. Solitude punctuated by the occasional knock at the cave door. Humans, it seems, can't resist the mystery of someone who walks away. You tear a small piece of bread and chew slowly. The texture is soft, the flavour rich after weeks of roots and barley. It feels almost sinful, this luxury. You eat just enough to stop the ache in your stomach, then wrap the rest carefully in cloth. The cheese, though, oh, that's staying. You take a small bite, savouring its saltiness. You grin. Saintly work deserves a reward, doesn't it? By midday, more visitors appear. 2 men this time, farmers, judging by their calloused hands. They kneel awkwardly near the entrance, hats clutched to their chests. "Pray for our crops, Holy one says. "The frost came early." You nod, though you feel anything but holy. Still, you recite a short blessing, tracing the air with your hand. The words feel heavy and strange in your mouth, half ritual, half hope. When you finish, they thank you with wide eyes, leaving behind a small jar of honey. You stare at it, golden and glimmering in the light. You can't help but laugh. Your cave is turning into a medieval farmer's market. But something shifts in you that day. You realise your solitude isn't impermeable. The world keeps reaching in, tugging at the edges. For every prayer you whisper into the dark, an echo seems to answer from beyond. Maybe that's how this works. Not withdrawal, but balance. Stillness drawing motion. Later you sit by your fire and think about fame. Not the modern kind, but the strange reluctant fame of holiness. The chronicles are full of such stories. Hermits dragged back into the spotlight by admirers. St. Guthlac in his fenland hut. St. Anthony besieged by disciples in the desert. Historians still debate whether their legends were truth or exaggeration. But one thing's clear, people crave sanctity, even second-hand. You can almost hear the gossip spreading in the village below. He talks to God, they say. He hasn't bathed in months, and the angels love him for it. My cousin saw a light over his cave at night. You roll your eyes affectionately. Medieval marketing at its finest. A squirrel appears near the entrance, sniffing curiously at the crumbs you've dropped. You toss it a bit of bread. "There you go," you whisper. "Everyone gets blessed today." The squirrel snatches it and scampers off. You chuckle, your congregation is growing, one species at a time. The visits become routine, a widow seeking comfort, a knight asking forgiveness, a child bringing a wildflower. You speak little, mostly listening. Sometimes you offer advice, sometimes silence. It feels strange at first, this role you never asked for, but you sense that in their eyes your isolation gives your words weight. The less you speak, the more they believe. And yet when the visitors leave, the silence feels heavier. You start to wonder whether solitude ever truly existed. Even alone, you're haunted by voices. Theirs, your own, maybe something deeper. You think of the early anchorites who built their cells beside churches so they could hear mass through the wall but never be seen. You envy them, their semi-detachment, their neat boundaries. You, however, are a rumour made flesh. As night falls, you unwrap the last piece of bread, dip it in honey and eat slowly. The sweetness stings your throat. You close your eyes, tasting sunlight in the dark. You whisper a small prayer, not for strength or patience or even faith, but for quiet. Just quiet. The cave answers with its usual soft drip of water, as if agreeing but unwilling to promise. You smile, leaning back against the wall. Maybe solitude was never about being unseen. Maybe it was about learning how to see differently, to hear the world's noise without letting it drown you. The fire burns low. Outside, the wind hums a faint, endless note, like the world itself breathing. You watch the shadows dance, and for the first time, you don't mind that people have found you. Maybe this is what the hermits meant when they said, even solitude is part of community, just stretched thin across silence. You murmur your final thought aloud. Perhaps the trick isn't keeping the world out, it's learning when to open the door. The cave swallows your words, tucks them somewhere deep and holds them like a secret. The morning light barely creeps in when you wake to find your candle half melted, the wax forming tiny frozen lakes on the rock. Your stomach murmurs, your hands are stiff, and the memory of yesterday's visitors still lingers. Faces, voices, a jar of honey now empty except for a golden stain. Solitude, it seems, comes with echoes, but today those echoes take on a new form. You begin your prayers as usual, kneeling on the cold earth. The rhythm of the words steadies you, Pater Noster, Ave Maria. The Latin rolls off your tongue like water over stone. But midway through, something shifts. A flicker of light behind your closed eyes. You pause, open them. The cave seems brighter, though the fire hasn't been lit. You blink, heart pounding, maybe it's nothing, maybe it's something. You've heard of this before. Visions, revelations, divine whispers. The lives of the saints are full of them. Angels appearing in beams of light, Christ descending in silence, demons scratching at walls. Historians still argue whether these were spiritual encounters or the side effects of starvation, exhaustion, and extreme isolation. You, right now, would argue for all of the above. You close your eyes again and breathe slowly. The light fades, leaving only the usual dimness. Still, something inside you feels stirred, awake. You whisper, "If that was you, Lord, I'm listening." The cave gives no reply, just a single drip of water, patient and indifferent. Later that morning, you step outside. The sky is bruised with winter clouds, the kind that look heavy with snow. You walk slowly down the slope toward the frozen stream, gathering what little wood you can find. The air tastes sharp, metallic. You notice how quiet everything is. No birds, no wind, just a thick silence that feels almost sacred. Then, faintly, you hear a voice. At first, it sounds like the wind, but as you stop and listen, you realize it's coming from within you, soft, insistent, familiar yet strange. Words form without sound. Be still. You freeze, half terrified, half thrilled. The rational part of you whispers, "You're tired, hungry, imagining things." The faithful part whispers back, "So what if you are?" You close your eyes, grip your staff, and wait. The voice doesn't return. Only the silence remains, heavy and tender. You walk back to your cave, lost in thought. The medieval hermits wrote about moments like this, visitations that blurred the line between body and spirit. Some described angels who brought warmth in winter, others demons who tempted them with visions of feasts or lovers. There's even a record of one poor hermit who swore the devil himself visited just to argue theology. Historians, of course, still debate whether these stories are literal or literary, but sitting here in your cave, you begin to see how both might be true. You light the fire, watching the flames lick upward, throwing shadows across the walls. The flicker looks alive tonight, almost deliberate. Faces form in the smoke, kind, watchful, gone in an instant. You remember what one chronicler said, "The holy man, when alone, sees what others do not see, for he listens to what others fear to hear." You'd laugh if it didn't feel so accurate. By afternoon, the wind picks up. Snow begins to fall in thick, lazy spirals, muffling every sound. You huddle near the fire, the cave glowing orange. The warmth lulls you into a light trance, half awake, half dreaming. You see images behind your eyelids, a vast field, sunlight spilling over it, a figure in white walking toward you, barefoot, unhurried. You reach out, but the vision melts like frost. You gasp and open your eyes. The fire crackles. The cave is empty. You laugh quietly, shaking your head. "All right, Lord," you whisper. "If that was you again, next time bring a blanket." Still, the image won't leave. You feel a strange comfort, a deep calm. Maybe this is what revelation feels like. Not thunder or prophecy, but a quiet moment when the walls between worlds thin just enough for light to slip through. Evening comes, and you decide to write, or at least scratch, a few lines onto the cave wall with a piece of charcoal. Silence is not empty. It listens. The words feel important, though you can't explain why. Maybe centuries from now, someone will find them and wonder what kind of man wrote them. Maybe they'll assume you are mad. Maybe they'll be right. You eat a small supper of dried roots and sip melted snow. The hunger feels different tonight. Less physical, more spiritual. You've started craving meaning the way you once craved bread. That's a dangerous kind of hunger. The church fathers warned about it, how zeal could burn as quickly as faith. But it's also the hunger that drives saints, poets, and fools alike. A quirky historical note crosses your mind as you stare into the fire. Some hermits, during deep fasts, reported smelling heavenly fragrances, the scent of roses or myrrh filling their cells. One monk wrote that he heard celestial music so beautiful it made him weep for hours. Scholars still argue whether these were mystical gifts or sensory deprivation at work. You wonder what your cave might sound like if heaven ever decided to drop by. Night falls hard and early. You lie down, wrapped in your cloak, staring at the ceiling. The shadows shift with the flicker of the dying fire. One looks like a pair of wings. You smile faintly. "If you're watching," you whisper to the darkness, "keep me from going crazy. Or at least make it interesting." The cave doesn't answer, but the fire gives one last pop like a divine chuckle. You close your eyes, and sleep comes gently, full of light that doesn't burn and silence that isn't empty. Maybe tomorrow you'll doubt it all. But for tonight, you let yourself believe that in the heart of this frozen cave, something holy really did touch the air. When you wake, it's still dark, but not the kind of dark that feels empty. The cave glows faintly, just enough to outline the shapes of stone, straw, and the thin plume of smoke curling from your dying fire. Your body aches, but your mind is alert, humming with the memory of last night's strange calm. The visions, the warmth, the light, whatever they were, they've left something behind, something quieter than peace and sharper than doubt. The first sound you hear is the wind sneaking through a crack in the rock. The second is the steady rhythm of water dripping from the ceiling into your clay bowl. Drip, drip, drip. It's your only clock out here, your only reminder that time still exists. You stretch, rub your eyes, and start the morning ritual. Prayer, fire, food, or what passes for food. The fire takes longer today. The wood is damp. You curse softly under your breath, then laugh. Saints probably didn't swear at kindling, you say to yourself. But saints probably weren't freezing either. You finally coax a spark into flame, feeding it patiently, until the cave blushes with light. You warm your hands, watching the smoke drift toward the ceiling. It gathers there, trapped before curling back down. The air grows thick and sweetly acrid. You know the smell well by now, burnt tallow, damp moss, and faint rot. The scent of your life. Keeping warm here isn't just comfort, it's survival. Medieval hermits faced winters with little more than faith and improvisation. Some dug deeper chambers to trap body heat. Others blocked doorways with animal skins or built low stone walls to shrink the living space. You decide to try that last one today. You gather loose stones and stack them into a small barricade across the draftiest part of the entrance. It's crude, uneven, but it makes a difference. Historians still argue about how these solitary dwellers managed not to freeze to death. Some say they used layers of straw and animal hides, others suggest that prolonged exposure toughened their bodies to the cold. You suspect the truth lies somewhere between divine grace and good circulation. You pause to flex your fingers, feeling the blood return. The cold here doesn't just sting, it seeps. It becomes a presence, a quiet adversary. It numbs, then whispers, then tempts. You think of all the stories. Hermits who froze while praying, found months later with smiles frozen on their faces, their fingers clasped around crosses of ice. You whisper a dry joke. Here lies a man holy and well preserved. Still, you know the danger is real. When the wind shifts, the temperature drops sharply. You pull your cloak tighter, layering furs and wool until you look like a shapeless mound of piety. The fire helps, but only so much. You start to move, pacing the cave's narrow floor, swinging your arms, stamping your feet. Every step becomes a kind of prayer, rhythmic, desperate, necessary. You remember a trick an old monk once mentioned: if your body fails, keep your mind awake with song. So you hum, softly at first, then louder. The notes bounce against the stone, trembling back to you. Your voice sounds strange, like someone else's. You switch to Latin chants, the ones you half remember from your younger days. Domine labia mea aperies? Lord, open my lips. The irony isn't lost on you. By midday, the fire burns low again. You add the last of your dry wood, then sit close enough to feel your cloak smoke a little. The warmth seeps into your bones like a slow blessing. For a moment, you stop thinking about cold. You take out your bowl, now filled with melted snow, and sip it slowly. The water is icy, but it tastes clean, alive. You stare into its surface, watching the reflection of the fire ripple. It looks like a second world, the one you've left behind, still moving without you. The afternoon drifts by in fragments, tending the fire, patching leaks, mumbling prayers. Outside, snow keeps falling, soft and relentless. The cave feels smaller, safer, almost womb-like. You begin to understand why some hermits spoke of their cells as living creatures, places that breathed, listened, and kept secrets. As the sky darkens again, you wrap your blanket tighter and hunch near the fire. The smoke has painted the cave walls black, but you notice faint carvings beneath the soot. Lines, circles, maybe words. You scrape gently with your knife, revealing old etchings. Someone lived here before you. The marks are crude but deliberate. A cross, a sunburst, and what looks like a name worn smooth by time. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with temperature. You whisper to the empty space. Were you cold too? It's a strange comfort knowing you're not the first fool to choose this life. A quirky tidbit flickers through your mind. Archaeologists have actually found carved graffiti left by medieval hermits, names, prayers, even doodles of animals. One wall in England bears the words, "Christ is my heat." Historians still argue whether it was metaphor or sheer optimism. You grin, then trace the newly uncovered cross with your fingertip. Christ is my heat, you repeat softly, testing the phrase. It feels both ridiculous and perfect. The fire snaps, sending a shower of sparks upward. For a heartbeat, they hang in the air like tiny stars. You watch them fade one by one, thinking how fragile light is out here. You add another branch to the flames, though you know it's your last piece of wood. Night comes heavy and long. You lie down close to the fire, one arm curled around your cloak, the other tucked beneath your head. The warmth on your face is thin, fleeting. You whisper the same prayer you whisper every night, "Keep me through the cold." And just before sleep claims you, you think of all the unseen hermits across the centuries, men and women huddled in caves, huts, hollows, fighting the same battle between warmth and faith. Maybe they whisper too. Maybe across the distance of time your words and theirs meet somewhere in the dark, warming each other like embers carried by wind. When dawn finally comes, it's more grey than gold. The fire has gone out again. Nothing left but a pile of pale ash, still warm at its heart. You stretch beneath your blanket, the air biting at your face, and listen. Outside, the forest murmurs faintly. It's the first morning in weeks when the wind doesn't sound angry. The long winter might be easing its grip at last. You crawl toward the cave entrance and peek out. The snow has thinned, and streaks of green puncture the white like tiny promises. The stream below runs freely again, a silver line cutting through the frost. You breathe deep. The air still chills your lungs, but it smells different now. Wet earth, pine sap, something like renewal. You've survived the worst. Somehow you've endured. And as you sit there, numb fingers pressed to the thawing rock, you realise that time itself has changed shape. Seasons here aren't measured in calendars or festivals. They're measured in endurance. The hermit's life, you now know, isn't about days. It's about thresholds. Each season is a trial, a kind of spiritual exam. Survive winter, and spring feels less like a change of weather and more like a resurrection. You step outside cautiously, your boots sinking into soft slushy snow. Every sound feels new. The gurgle of water, the distant caw of crows, even your own footsteps. The world that once terrified you now feels like an old friend waking up. You gather fallen branches, grateful to see they're dry for once. As you carry them back to the cave, you notice a small patch of green tucked near the rocks, a cluster of early herbs pushing through the melt. You smile. Dinner's already volunteering. Inside again, you rebuild your fire, striking flint until sparks leap to life. The warmth feels different now. Not desperate, not defiant, just right. You sit near it, palms open to the heat, and let the memory of the last few months wash over you. The hunger, the storms, the endless nights. They feel distant, softened, almost holy in hindsight. Historians still argue about how hermits mark time, if they did at all. Some carved notches on their walls, others counted prayers instead of days. A few left no marks, claiming eternity swallowed the hours. You understand that now. In the silence, time stops being something you measure. It becomes something you inhabit. You take a small wooden stick and scratch into the soot-dark wall. A sun. Just a circle with lines radiating outward. You grin. Your first calendar drawn not to keep time but to celebrate surviving it. By midday, the sunlight actually reaches inside your cave. You hadn't noticed before how far it travels now that the sun sits higher. It creeps across the floor, touching your feet, your bowl, your staff. For the first time in months, the light feels warm. You close your eyes, lift your face to it, and whisper, "Thank you." You spend the afternoon exploring the slope above your home. The snow is melting fast, and the ground beneath smells rich and alive. You find animal tracks everywhere. Deer, foxes, even the faint print of a boar. Nature's busy undoing the stillness of winter, and you feel oddly proud to be part of it. You've been silent this whole time, but somehow, you are part of the thaw too. At a small clearing, you find something unexpected. The first flowers. Tiny, blue, trembling things pushing through the soil as if daring the frost to return. You kneel and touch one gently, its petals fragile as breath. It reminds you of something a monk once said, "Grace grows where the world forgets to look." You nod to yourself. Seems he was right. When you return to your cave, you notice your reflection in the water bowl. The face staring back startles you. The beard has gone wild, your skin weathered, eyes darker but clearer. You look older, stranger but somehow more yourself. The cave has carved you the way wind carves cliffs. Slowly, invisibly, but irrevocably. As evening settles, you prepare your meal, a mix of herbs, leftover barley, and a scrap of cheese gifted weeks ago, now hard as stone but still edible. You crush the herbs, stir them into the pot, and hum softly while the steam rises. It smells like hope, or at least like soup pretending to be hope. You eat slowly, grateful for every bite. Hunger feels different now. It's not an enemy, it's a companion that teaches patience. You wonder if that's what the old saints meant when they talked about fasting as prayer. Not self-punishment, but alignment. A way to make every craving point upward. As darkness creeps in, you light a small candle. Its flame wobbles, but holds. You take out the jar of honey the farmers gave you and find just one golden smear at the bottom. You dip a finger in and taste it, closing your eyes. Sweetness hits your tongue like sunlight. You whisper, "Still here?" Later, lying on your straw bed, you think about the rhythm of life you've built. The world beyond feels like a story you once heard but no longer belong to. Yet you don't feel cut off. You feel tuned in. Like the silence itself hums with meaning. You remember reading somewhere that some hermits marked each passing year not with festivals, but with gratitude rituals, lighting candles for each season survived, singing alone at dawn to honour the return of life. You like that. You think you'll do the same tomorrow. Outside, an owl hoots once, twice, then fades. The fire flickers. Your eyes grow heavy and you realise this is the first night you're not afraid of the dark. The cold is still there, yes, but it feels less like an enemy now, more like an old teacher who's finally said, "Lesson learned." Before sleep takes you, you whisper into the stillness, "If the spring forgets me, I'll remind it where I live." The cave, warm and breathing, seems to smile back in silence. The first true spring rain arrives before dawn, soft, persistent, and impossibly gentle after months of winter's hostility. You wake to the sound of it pattering at the cave mouth, a rhythm so steady it feels like the earth is breathing again. You sit up slowly, the smell of damp stone and wet moss filling your lungs. The sound is hypnotic, almost musical. You think, not for the first time, that silence isn't the absence of noise, it's the tuning of the world into harmony. Outside, the air feels different, softer, warmer, alive. Mist rises from the forest below like smoke from 1,000 hidden fires. Water drips from pine needles, glistening in the dim morning light. You step out barefoot, wincing as the wet earth squelches beneath you, and tilt your head up to let the rain hit your face. It's cold, but not cruel. It feels like a baptism, one you didn't plan but probably needed. You've been here long enough now that the village below has stopped calling you the mad hermit in the hills, and started calling you the holy man. You find that both titles feel equally ridiculous. Still, the name travels faster than you do. Every week or so, someone climbs the winding path to your cave, bringing gifts or questions or confessions they can't tell their priests. You've grown used to it. You even keep a small stone bench outside now, a makeshift seat for visitors. Some stay for hours, weeping or rambling, others just kneel, ask for a blessing and disappear again into the trees. You never quite know what to say. Most days you say little because you've learned something most people haven't. Silence can do the talking if you let it. Today you hear voices long before you see their owners. Two men arguing in hushed tones as they climb. Their words reach you like distant waves. "He sees visions," one says. "My cousin swears he healed a child's fever." "Nonsense," the other replies. "He probably told the boy to drink more water." You can't help but grin. "Probably both true," you murmur, and step back into the shadows of your cave as they appear at the entrance. They're farmers, judging by their clothes and the mud caked on their boots. One carries a small sack, the other a look of desperation. They bow low, crossing themselves. "Holy Father," the first begins, voice trembling, "our fields rot. We've prayed, we've fasted, but the frost killed half our seed. Will you pray for us?" You nod slowly. "Of course." They kneel, heads bowed, while you speak softly. Nothing grand, just a quiet request for mercy and renewal. The words feel simple, but something in the men's eyes changes as you speak. Maybe it's the rhythm of the prayer. Maybe it's the echo in the cave. Maybe it's the hope they brought with them, finding a shape in your voice. When you finish, they leave a gift, a small cloth pouch of dried beans. You watch them go, their figures vanishing into the mist, and you're struck again by the strange irony of it all. You came here to disappear, and instead, you've become a destination. Historians still argue how much of this holy celebrity was self-made and how much was rumour. Some hermits genuinely wanted obscurity, but were hunted down by admirers anyway. Others leaned into the fame, offering advice, performing miracles, or at least pretending to until it became true. You're not sure which kind you are yet. You sit near the cave entrance and untie the pouch. The beans are small, pale, perfectly shaped. You hold one up to the light, smiling. Looks like Providence has a sense of humour, you say. A gift that demands work. You'll plant them when the ground dries, near the edge of the slope where the sunlight lingers longest. The day unfolds with gentle monotony. Fire tending, prayer, a bit of wood gathering. But the quiet is occasionally broken by echoes of your growing reputation. You hear laughter on the wind, distant singing, maybe even your name spoken in reverence or mockery. Both sound the same from this distance. By midday the rain stops, leaving everything glistening. You take the opportunity to walk farther than usual, past the stream and into the forest beyond. Birds flit through the dripping branches. Somewhere water runs fast and clear. You find a small clearing and sit just to listen. The world feels impossibly alive, every leaf trembling, every droplet catching the light. You remember something you once read about St. Francis talking to animals, calling them brothers and sisters. Historians still argue whether that was mystical unity or medieval poetry. But sitting here, surrounded by so much gentle movement, it doesn't feel far-fetched. You whisper, half joking, "Good morning, Sister Sparrow." The bird on the nearest branch tilts its head unimpressed. You laugh softly. Fair enough. On your way back, you find a strip of parchment wedged in the rocks near your cave, someone's letter, weighted by a small stone. You unfold it carefully. The handwriting is clumsy but earnest. "Please, holy man, pray for my husband. He drinks too much ale and forgets his kindness. If you can make him gentle again, I will bring candles every feast day." You fold the note back, heart sinking a little. You're not sure if prayer can sober anyone up, but you know the courage it takes to write such a thing. You tuck the letter into a niche in the wall beside your bed. The cave is becoming a library of sorrow, one note at a time. That night you light a candle for the woman and her husband. The flame dances in the still air, flickering shadows across the walls. You whisper a blessing, though you're not sure who needs it more, the husband or the wife who still believes he can change. Before you sleep, you sit quietly, thinking about how stories travel, how one whispered tale of kindness can become a miracle by the time it reaches the next village. You suspect most miracles are born that way, not from divine power, but from the desperate beauty of belief itself. You smile at the thought. "Let them believe," you whisper. "If hope needs a name, mine will do." The candle burns low, the cave hums softly with night sounds, and you drift into dreams filled with voices, some you know, some you never will, all calling your name through the gentle spring rain. The next morning dawns clear and blue, a sky so open it feels like you could step into it and keep walking forever. The rain has washed everything clean. The stones outside your cave gleam, the moss glows green again, and even the cold feels softer now, like an old argument you finally decided to stop having. You sit at the cave mouth, legs folded, hands wrapped around a small wooden cup of warm water. The air tastes of pine and damp earth. Below you the valley stirs, the faint sound of a bell from the village, a dog barking, the rhythm of daily life you once belonged to but no longer miss. You're about to settle into your morning prayers when you hear it, the distant sound of hoofbeats. You frown, stand, and peer down the slope. A figure in a dark robe is making his way up the narrow path, leading a horse. The robe's colour, black with a splash of white at the collar, tells you everything before the face comes into view. A monk. You sigh softly. "Well," you murmur, "the monastery's finally remembered me." When he reaches the entrance, he bows, breath steaming in the cool air. "Brother," he says, his voice calm but edged with purpose. "Peace be with you." You incline your head. "And with you, Father." He looks around your cave, the straw bed, the fire pit, the rough cross carved into the wall. You can tell he's trying not to look judgmental, but monks have a way of making curiosity look like disapproval. "It's humbler than I expected," he says finally. You smile faintly. "It's rent-free." He doesn't laugh. Monks never do when they're on official business. "I come from St. Bertin's Abbey," he says, brushing frost from his robe. "Our abbot sends greetings and a request. Your name has spread far, brother. Pilgrims speak of you from here to Rouen. Some call you a miracle worker. Others say you heal by touch." You raise an eyebrow. "I heal blisters with common sense and hunger with barley. The rest is gossip." He nods, lips tightening. "Even so, your fame troubles the abbey. You draw people away from the church's care. The abbot asks that you return with me, to live within our walls again under proper rule. A hermit's life is not meant to be permanent." You study him for a long moment. The wind sighs through the trees behind you. "Rule," you repeat softly. "It's funny. Out here I thought I'd escaped rules. Turns out I just traded them for harder ones." The monk shifts, uncomfortable. "You live without confession, without communion. without guidance. You gesture towards the valley. And yet they come, Father. Every week the poor, the frightened, the lost. If the church guides them, why do they climb this hill to talk to a fool in a cave? For a moment his eyes flicker with something, doubt maybe, or envy. Then he straightens. The abbot believes you have done much good, but solitude breeds pride. It's dangerous to stand apart too long. Even Christ returned to his disciples. You chuckle. True, but he also spent 40 days in the desert first. That earns you a thin smile. 40 days, he says, not 4 years. You both stand in silence for a while. The only sound the rustle of wind through pine needles. Then he steps closer. Come back with me, he says quietly. You'd have warmth, food, fellowship. You wouldn't be alone. You look past him toward the horizon, where sunlight spills like molten gold over the valley. Alone isn't the problem, you say. It's the point. Historians still argue whether hermits like you were rebels or mystics, whether leaving the church's structure was spiritual courage or subtle disobedience. Some, like St. Romuald, founded entire orders after years of solitude. Others simply disappeared, names swallowed by moss and wind. The monk sighs. If you stay, your legend will grow. People will make of you what they wish. A prophet, a heretic, a saint, you'll lose yourself in their stories. You glance at the small pile of gifts beside your fire. Candles, herbs, scraps of parchment with desperate prayers. Maybe that's already happened. He studies you one last time, eyes softening. Then let me carry your answer to the abbot. You smile gently. Tell him I'm praying on it. He nods, understanding the finality in your tone, and bows. May God keep you, brother. And you reply. He turns, mounts his horse, and begins the slow descent down the slope. You watch until he disappears among the trees, the echo of hooves fading into the hum of spring. Inside, the cave feels both emptier and lighter. You sit by your fire, poke at the coals, and think about what he said. Pride, isolation, the danger of too much silence. Maybe he's right. Maybe holiness needs witnesses. But as you listen to the wind curl through your narrow doorway, you realize something deeper. You don't crave sainthood. You crave stillness. You take up a bit of charcoal and add a new line to the wall beside your earlier scrawl. To vanish is not to be lost. You sit back, reading it, then laugh quietly. That'll scandalize someone someday. As night falls, the forest glows faintly under a silver moon. You step outside once more, breathing in the chill air, listening to the faint, distant bells of the monastery below. Each ring feels like a heartbeat you no longer share. Yet you whisper a prayer for them anyway. For the monks, the pilgrims, even the abbot who worries for your soul. Then you return to your cave, to your silence, to the rhythm you've made. You lie down, the embers painting the walls gold, and let the night cradle you. Somewhere between wakefulness and dream, you imagine the monk reaching home, telling his brothers he refused. And you imagine them sighing, shaking their heads, whispering that you've lost your way. But you know better. You didn't lose your way, you simply stopped needing a map. The next winter comes quietly, almost politely. No storm announces it, no frost shatters overnight. It just seeps in day by day, a slow reclaiming of breath and warmth. The leaves go first, then the light, until once again your world contracts to the space between the fire and the cave wall. You're older now, how much you can't quite tell. The seasons blur together here like colours in water. Your beard has gone white at the edges. Your hands, once steady, tremble slightly when you light the fire. But your mind feels sharper than ever. Maybe solitude hones it like a blade. Or maybe you've just talked to yourself enough to become an expert audience. You spend your days as you always have, praying, mending, tending, surviving. But the rhythm feels different now. Softer, slower. The urgency that once drove you, the need to prove something, to find something, has faded like smoke. What remains is a strange, clean kind of calm. Outside, the valley sleeps under frost. The stream has frozen again, though not fully. It murmurs beneath its icy shell like a secret it refuses to stop telling. The trees stand bare, their branches clawing at a pale grey sky. And you, sitting by your small fire, watch it all with the quiet detachment of someone who has seen too many winters to be surprised by another. Your health has faltered in small, stubborn ways. You tire faster. The cold lingers longer in your bones. The walk to the stream feels steeper than it used to. But you don't complain, not aloud at least. You just move slower, speak less, and spend more time staring at the flames. Historians still argue whether the final years of hermits were tragic or transcendent. Some say they died raving, lost in visions. Others claim they went peacefully, smiling as if stepping through a familiar doorway. You suspect the truth was both, that even holiness can ache. A few visitors still climb the path, though not as often now that the snows have returned. The first is a boy, barely 12, cheeks red from the cold. He carries a loaf of bread and a folded letter. You invite him in, motioning him toward the fire. "The villagers said I should come," he explains, voice trembling slightly. "They said you bless people before winter takes them." You smile gently. "Before winter takes them, or before spring brings them back?" He doesn't answer, just holds out the letter. You unfold it carefully. The handwriting is shaky but familiar. The abbot's. You read it in silence. "Brother, we have heard rumours of your health. If you can travel, come to us. You have given enough to solitude. Let your last days be in company, under care, under warmth. There is no shame in returning. In Christ's love. Abbot Guillaume." You set the letter down, tracing the ink with your thumb. "He's still worried about me," you say softly. The boy looks at you, uncertain. "What should I tell him?" he asks. You glance toward the mouth of the cave. Snowflakes drift lazily down, catching the firelight. "Tell him I am already home." The boy nods, leaves the bread, and scurries off into the snow. You watch until he disappears, a small figure swallowed by white. Then you break the loaf, eat slowly, and let the warmth spread through your chest. That night the pain comes, not sharp but deep, a slow, insistent ache in your chest that refuses to ease. You lie down, breathing carefully, counting the drips from the ceiling like a lullaby. You tell yourself it's nothing, that the cold has simply settled in too deep. But part of you knows. You dream restlessly. The cave flickers with strange light. You see faces, villagers, the monk, the woman who asked you to pray for her husband. They smile, fade, return. You hear the stream whispering your name beneath the ice. You see your younger self stepping into the cave for the first time, full of pride and fear. And you hear a voice, not thunderous or divine, just familiar. "Be still." You wake, but it's hard to tell if it's morning or eternity pressing its hand against the world. The cave feels both smaller and endless. You sit up slowly, wincing at the pain in your ribs, and look around. Everything is as it always was. The soot-dark walls, the small cross, the embers glowing faintly. But something in the air feels final, like the moment before a candle's last flicker. You drag yourself toward the entrance. The snow is deep, but the sky beyond it is luminous, glowing with dawn. You sink to your knees, breathing hard. The cold bites, but it doesn't hurt. Not anymore. You lift your face to the light, eyes half closed. "I've lived long enough," you whisper. Long enough to see silence answer back. A gust of wind sweeps through, rattling the trees, stirring your cloak. The world feels close, listening. You smile. There's a story, half legend, half memory, about hermits who died mid-prayer, their last breath mistaken for a sigh of relief. Historians still argue whether that's pious invention or wishful thinking. You decide you like it either way. You close your eyes, resting your head against the stone. The pain ebbs, the air grows lighter. You think of spring, of the first rains, of the boy's wide eyes and the abbot's letter. You think of all the pilgrims who climbed this hill seeking something you never quite found for yourself. And then, softly, you let go. Outside, the first snow of the season falls heavier, muffling everything into silence. Inside the cave, the fire gutters once, then fades to ash. But in that stillness there's no fear, only the echo of a breath becoming part of the wind. Days, or perhaps weeks, pass before anyone finds you. The first to arrive is a shepherd, climbing the slope in search of a lost lamb. He spots the faint wisp of smoke from the cave and steps inside, expecting warmth. What he finds instead is peace. Still, absolute, complete. You're sitting just as you were, back against the wall, head tilted toward the light that filters through the cave mouth. The fire's long cold, the bowl empty, but your face wears the faintest trace of a smile. The shepherd stands there for a long moment, hat pressed to his chest, before whispering a prayer he doesn't remember learning. He runs down the hill to tell the village. Within hours, people climb the path, farmers, widows, children, even a few monks from the abbey below. They enter one by one, quiet as snowfall. No one speaks loudly. Some touch the hem of your cloak. Others place small offerings, candles, flowers, bread. A few kneel. Historians still argue what happened next. Some chronicles claim your body never decayed, that a sweet scent lingered in the air. Others say the villagers built a shrine right there in the cave, sealing it off to preserve the sanctity of the place. A more sceptical record simply states, the hermit died in his cell and was buried near the stream. But the details hardly matter. What endures is the echo. Your name becomes a story, your cave a pilgrimage site. Generations come and go, and still people climb the hill to sit in the silence you once tended. They say the air inside feels different, thicker, gentler, as if the stone remembers you. Over time, the cave changes hands. A monk lives there for a few decades, then another. Later, a wandering friar stops to rest, leaving behind a painted icon of a man with kind eyes and wind-tangled hair. No one remembers who he was meant to be. Centuries pass, the forest thickens, the trail fades, but the legend doesn't. They tell it in the villages below, the story of a man who went to live alone in the cold and somehow found warmth. They argue about the details, of course. Whether you saw angels, whether you healed the sick, whether you truly refused the abbot's offer. Historians still debate it all. Yet the heart of the story never changes. A man chose silence, and the silence spoke back. Some say your ghost still guards the path. That travellers who lose their way in the mist sometimes hear a voice whisper, "Be still." Others claim they see light flickering from the cave on winter nights, as if someone inside has just coaxed the fire to life. Most dismiss it as village fancy, but every generation has a few who climb just to see. Inside they find nothing extraordinary, just stone, soot and faint carvings on the wall, a sun, a cross, and 4 words barely legible beneath centuries of moss. To vanish is not to be lost, and yet every visitor leaves changed. Some say it's the silence, others the chill. Maybe it's simply the reminder that faith doesn't always roar, it often whispers. The fire's gone out long ago, but its warmth lingers, carried through time like the memory of a song you once knew by heart. You can almost hear it now, the gentle crackle, the faint hum of breath against stone. If you close your eyes, you might even feel it. That weightless stillness, the kind that presses softly against your chest but doesn't crush. The hermit's story doesn't really end with his death, does it? It ends in the echo, the same echo that hums through every quiet room, every late-night thought, every small act of stillness you make without meaning to. He didn't just live in the cold, he learned how to listen to it, to see the divine not in the thunder, but in the drip of water and the sigh of wind through pine. And maybe that's the part you'll carry with you tonight, that solitude isn't emptiness. It's a space the world rarely gives you anymore. A moment to remember that even when you're alone, you're still held by something vast, patient and unseen. So, as you lie there now, let your breath slow. Feel the weight of your blanket, the rhythm of your pulse, the quiet hum of life that never really stops. Somewhere out in the dark, the mountains are still breathing, the cave still waits, unchanged. And maybe, if you listen closely, you'll hear it too. The faint whisper that outlasted centuries. Be still. Sweet dreams,